Welcome back, everyone. In this video we are going to jump into adding some related content to our pre-batch component. So here we have our pre-batch definition that we built. Here is our pre-batch component for our text component, and within this component is where we are going to add the XML that we need to add some related content to this pre-batch component. So right after this closing tag for the attributes related to the component is where we're going to add this. So I'm going to go ahead and just paste in some XML here, and we are again going to talk through this. So here we have the opening element for related content, and the first thing that we see here is name, and that just defines, it does two things actually. It defines the name of this piece of related content, and it's also the name that we need to specify in the batch definition when we tell the batch to use this piece of related content. The next attribute we have is type, which specifies the type of implementation for the related content. Now in this case we're using templated layouts, and that basically means that this piece of related content is going to come from or was built using just one of our XML layout files like we've been working with throughout this training course. Next is the URI, and that's the name of that XML file, the template that we built. And I'll show you that here in just a little bit. And then we have render time, and this tells the system when to generate this piece of related content. Now there's two options for that. We can generate this content at pre-batch time when pre-batch processing occurs, or we can generate the content at batch time. And we already spoke a little bit in a previous video about why you would want to do those different options. Next we have rotation, if there is a need to rotate your related content. And then we have match content size, which as the name implies just tells the system that it needs to make the size of this piece of related content match the size of this pre-batch component that was generated. Then we have duplex, if we need to ensure that the related content has a backside. And then we have these last remaining attributes which are not typically used for related content, but they certainly can be dependent upon your situation and what your needs might be. So by default, when related content is generated, it is created as a separate PDF as far as the pre-batch process is concerned, or when it's generated at batch if render time is set to batch. So when you set the attribute for inline to true, it's going to make this page or this piece of content be one of the pages in the generated pre-batch component output, so it's just going to be a single PDF. And we're going to flip this back and forth and take a look at what that does so you can get a better idea of exactly what's happening there. Then when this is set to true, we have a couple more attributes that we can use, which is inline insert type, which says do we insert this before the content or after the content starts. And then the last attribute is just a range attribute that says where exactly do we insert this related content and how often. So those are all the attributes. We have this added in here. The other piece that you haven't seen yet, which I've already built, is the actual layout file that is used for this slate. Now, there's not a whole lot of data in it, and I'm going to show it to you here real quick. So we'll come over to Configuration Browser, and you can now see for this product within Configuration Browser, we have this branch called Related Content. And when you expand that, we have this new layout file called Trainbook Slate. Now if we open this, not a whole lot to look at. So this is a very simple file. Basically we just have our three default boxes at the top, and then I put one text stamp in that basically is going to stamp the word slate somewhere around the middle of the page, maybe a little bit higher than middle. Now, as we mentioned in a previous video, the type of information that goes on these order slates, or banners as they're sometimes called, is information specific to the order. So we're going to have customer order information, we're going to have a picture of the product to kind of give an idea as to what order that this is for, all of that kind of stuff. So if we come back over to the user interface, let's go ahead and reprocess this at pre-batch, and you'll see how this now comes up and generates a second PDF for us to work with. So we'll wait for that third light to get done there, and we will view our pre-batch. So now I'm sure you caught that as it was coming up. We saw that real briefly, our slate that was generated. If we make this Acrobat window a little bit smaller, we can see that it opened up 2 copies of Acrobat. Now we have one that shows our slate that we made, and again, not very impressive, not a whole lot of data on it, but we can tell that this is our slate, and then the other is our content. So we now have 2 pieces of information that we can pass into the batch definition, which we will do here in just a little bit. Now before we do that, I want to show you what happens when we change that attribute for inline back on our related content to true. So remember that previously, or how it is right now, we have 2 PDFs that were generated, one for the book content and one for the related content. But when we set that inline attribute to true, it's going to combine that into a single PDF. So we'll come down here and reprocess this one more time. See if that, there it goes. And we'll wait for that third light. All right, so let's take a look at, so here we just have one instance of Acrobat. And notice here we have page 1 as our slate, and then we go on to the rest of our book. So there's various reasons why you might want to do that. We have a feature within the software called Pack Slips, which can use this type of functionality, where you might want to insert your slate into the main content and then specify a range where you might want to put it after every page or only the first page, or various options. But again, it depends on what the customer requirements are for what you need to accomplish. So we're going to go ahead and turn that back off. So we'll come back down to our our related content. Set that back to false. And one other thing that I'll point out here, I don't have it listed up here with these other attributes that are in play, but you do have the ability to use a pre-batch imposition on a piece of related content. So I couldn't include that because I don't really have a pre-batch imposition that I wanted to use for this, so I just put it down here within comments so that we can see that that is also an attribute that you do have available to you for these. So we have that saved. Let's go ahead and reprocess this one more time so we can make sure that that change takes. And while that's reprocessing, we are going to go over to the batch definition, because once we generate additional pieces of content at pre-batch, we need to let the batch definition know about those so they can be included in the final batched output. So now here we have our batch definition, and remember that I said the pre-batch components order is where the items that come into a batch are going to be structured. So this is where the structure of your batch kind of forms, right here within this section, for this particular batch component anyway. So what we're going to do is we're going to just copy this line. And I'm going to come up here above it and paste it in there. And we're going to change the name to slate. Now, if you didn't notice this, back in our pre-batch definition, that's our slate itself. Back in our pre-batch definition, notice the name of this piece of content is slate. All lowercase, it needs to match exactly what we put inside the batch definition. So now our pre-batch components order has 2 pieces of content that we're going to use to build out this batch. The first one is the slate, and the second one is our text. So we're going to go ahead and save this. We'll come back to our UI, and we're going to create a batch. So we'll wait for this batch to process. We should get another one drop down here in just a little bit. There we go. So we'll wait for this to finish processing through the 4th light, and then we will switch over to the Press Jobs tab. Should be, there we go. And here is our new press job. I believe this is our new one. Yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at this and see what we have now. All right, so now in our batched output, we have a slate up here. We also have a slate down here. So remember, this is the first signature of the batch. So row 1, column 1, and we can see down here that it's copy 1 of 10. So it's the first book in the set. Now, let's go through this real quick. So we'll kind of go through page 3, 4, 5, get down here to the end. Okay, so here we're coming up on the end of our book, and here we have another slate for copy 7 of the book, and another slate for copy 2 of the book. Now, we're going to see this continue on through all 55 pages that we have here, where at the front of every book generated, we're going to get one of these order slates. Now, that may not be really necessary, and it's kind of a waste, because basically what these slates are going to show, like I said, are order level information, and all 10 of these books are part of the same order. So there's really no need to create 10 different copies of the exact same slate for these books. So we have an option that we can use within our batch definition that basically allows us to say, even though there's going to be 10 copies of this book where it's going to iterate 10 times through this pre-batch components order as the batch is being built, we only want the slate to show up one time. And that's what this attribute right here is for. So we have this attribute called once per pre-batch result only. Now if we set that to true, then we'll save this. Come back one more time, over to the products tab. Whoops, there we go. Create another batch. What we should see here is now we're only going to get the slate showing up for the first book in the set. So we'll wait for this batch to complete processing, and then we'll go over and view our pre-batch and make sure that that came out how we expect. So almost done with the batch. Come over here to the press jobs.
Here is what I found on the web.
All right, so here is our press job. We'll go to View, and notice we don't have it on this top signature up here anymore. But here we have our first slate. Now let's go down to where the second book starts. So we'll keep coming down here. All right, so we're getting close to the end of the book. And here's where it starts over. Notice we do not have, so there's page 10 of 10. Here's page 1 of 10, and we do not have any additional slates. And you can also see up here that we know from before we had 50 pages within this PDF output, and now we only have 51, and that extra page is our slate up here at the beginning of the job. So that is how we can add an additional piece of related content to a pre-batch component and then include that related content into our batched output. And then additionally have the option to control how many times that related content is going to show up for a given order within the batch. So I think that's about all we're going to cover in this particular video. And in the next video, we're going to look at the other side of this, where things start on the batch side, where we can add what is called additional content to our batch component. So we'll go ahead and end this one here, and I will catch you all in the next video.